Here's an in-depth look at the process of drawing a Zentangle or Zen Doodle. Firstly, start off with a small square of good quality paper that doesn't allow an ink pen to bleed. The small format is important as it encourages you to be able to complete a drawing in a reasonable amount of time. It also allows you to rotate the paper easily, which can help with the quality of your line work. My squares are around 4 inches or 100 millimeters square. There are also of varying shades of off-white that provides for a nice variety of drawings. First up, we need to draw a border. This can be straight or crooked. You can be creative here. Next, we're going to break up the space created by the border with a random line. This line is sometimes called a string. Don't get too complicated as a beginner, but again, you can be creative. The line can be straight or curved, or 2 lines as I've done here. Having drawn your string, we proceed to fill the areas we've created. This is where we use what are sometimes referred to as tangles. I'm going to use simple circles for this beginner exercise. An important concept to develop in our drawing is the idea of overlap. Overlap gives our drawing interest by adding depth. Also, you'll notice I'm being very deliberate with my line work, sometimes going back over it to firm it in. Don't be tempted to rush your drawing and produce shabby circles like these. Neat and tight line work works much better for this type of drawing. The next area I'm going to fill in with simple oval-shaped leaves. This is what's sometimes called a flow pattern, and the idea is to flow them out from a particular spot or corner. You'll notice as I flick the line for the central vein of the leaf that the stroke starts off thick and thins out at the end. Again, I'm being very deliberate with these lines, turning the drawing to help get them centered as best as possible and to get that tapered effect. Once again, I'm using overlap to get some depth into the space. I deliberately have larger ones in the corner from which they emanate, getting smaller further away. This sort of mimics what plants do when they grow. Also, I occasionally break the border, which is just a trick I use to add visual interest here and there. I wouldn't try to overdo this manoeuvre. The final space I'm going to fill with a simple tangle called tabs. This consists of a series of narrow horizontal lines, some with a little round tab added, as you can see. These lines, repeated, give the illusion of depth and sort of look like little hills going off into the distance. Now I'm going to fill in behind the circles using arced, almost parallel lines, and you'll notice that I've turned the tile so that I'm drawing in the natural arc of my hand. It's much easier to do a neat job this way. Next, I'm just going to add some extra leaves, which also break the boundary set by the string. I think this helps tie the sections together and again is using the concept of overlap to add depth. At this point I thought that the 2 string lines reminded me of hills, so I added a few stylized plants in groups of 3. I tried to keep the visual balance right by adding them to both sides of the drawing. I didn't want to overcrowd this beginner drawing with detail, so I used one of my favourite tricks to fill in a large area and added what could be stylized clouds or even trees or bushes. Then a group of 3 birds to finish that section. I like objects in odd-numbered groups. I just think they look better visually. Now I could have left the drawing here. It would stand quite okay on its own, but I opted for a little more detail to give the beginner some ideas about adding complexity, which is another concept that's important in this type of drawing. I used some geometrical bits and pieces to fill in some of the stripes behind the circle. Then I added some vertical hatching behind the leaves to give that side of the drawing a darker background and make the leaves pop forward a bit. This is a slow and deliberate process, and one in which you can feel quite meditative as you are doing it. This meditative experience is why the word Zen is often included in describing this type of drawing. Now I'm ready to go over the pencil lines in ink. I use a 0.5mm pen for the thicker lines, and a 0.2mm pen for the thinner details. As I go over the pencil lines, it doesn't matter if I get them exactly, as they're going to be erased anyway. Again, this can be quite a meditative experience. Once the inking in is complete, I erase my original pencil line work. You can take your drawings to the next level by adding shading. I first do some detailed hatching with a very fine 0.1mm pen, carefully around the base of the leaves. Then I use my HB pencil to shade areas that may get less light. And also in the centres of the circles to make them look more three-dimensional. Notice I don't shade all the way to the base of the circles. Then I use a homemade tortillon, which is basically a rolled up bit of paper, to smudge the pencil into a smooth gradient. And with that, it's a finished job. I hope this video gave you some insight into producing a simple piece of Zentangle inspired art. Have a look at my series of videos where I follow my own development as a Zentangler. You'll get a lot more insight and tips, and hopefully inspirations from them.